The auction block stood in the center of Alta, Utah's dusty Main Street, and Clara Vaughn had never imagined she would be standing on it with a price tag around her neck like cattle at the stockyard. The September sun beat down mercilessly in 1878, turning the wooden platform into a griddle beneath her worn boots, and she forced herself to keep her chin up even as bile rose in her throat. Her father's gambling debts had finally come due, and the creditors had decided that selling his 20-year-old daughter was the only way to recoup their losses. The crowd gathered before her was a mix of miners, ranchers, and opportunists, their faces blurred by the tears she refused to let fall. The auctioneer, a portly man named Hutchins with tobacco-stained teeth, grabbed her arm and pulled her forward. "Gentlemen, we have here a fine specimen. Young, strong, can cook and clean. We will start the bidding at $200. Clara's stomach twisted. $200. That was what her life was worth to these men. She scanned the crowd, looking for any sign of mercy, but found only hungry eyes and calculating expressions. A man in the front with greasy hair and a cruel smile raised his hand. 200, he called out, and Clara recognized him as Silas Morton, a mine owner known for working his employees to death and treating women even worse. 250, another voice joined, this one belonging to an older rancher whose wife had died the previous winter. The bidding continued, climbing higher and higher, and Clara felt herself becoming smaller with each increase. She thought of her mother, dead these past 5 years, and wondered what she would think of her husband now. Her father had not even come to watch his daughter be sold. He was probably passed out drunk in their ramshackle cabin on the edge of town, unable to face what his weakness had wrought. $500, Silas Morton announced, his voice triumphant. The crowd murmured. It was an astronomical sum for a woman, even one as young and capable as Clara. Hutchins raised his gavel. 500 going once, $1,000. The voice cut through the crowd like a knife, deep and steady, and every head turned to see who had spoken. Clara's eyes found him immediately. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that spoke of hard work rather than soft living. His dark hair touched his collar beneath a worn Stetson, and his face was tanned from years under the sun. He could not have been more than 25, she guessed, and there was something in his gray eyes that made her breath catch. He was not looking at her with the same predatory interest as the others. Instead, his gaze was steady, almost apologetic. The crowd erupted in shocked whispers. $1,000 was more money than most men in Alta would see in 5 years. Silas Morton's face turned purple. 1,200, he spat, glaring at the stranger. The tall man stepped forward, his spurs jingling softly. His clothes were dusty from travel, but Clara could see they were well made. A Colt revolver hung at his hip with the casual ease of someone who knew how to use it. $2,000, the stranger said calmly, and the entire street fell silent. Hutchins nearly dropped his gavel. Sir, that is, are you certain? I am certain. Cash money, right here and now. The man patted a leather satchel at his side. Silas Morton opened his mouth, then closed it again. Even his greed had limits, and $2,000 was beyond his reach. He shot one last venomous look at Clara before shouldering his way through the crowd and disappearing into the saloon. Sold. Hutchins brought down his gavel with a crack that made Clara flinch. Sold to the gentleman for $2,000. Sir, if you will step up here to complete the transaction. The stranger moved through the parting crowd with an easy grace. Up close, Clara could see the fine lines around his eyes, the shadow of stubble on his jaw, and the way his calloused hands handled the money with practiced efficiency. He counted out the bills while Hutchins watched with greedy fascination, then accepted the bill of sale that made Clara his property, her property. The thought made her want to scream or run or both, but her legs felt like water, and there was nowhere to go. The stranger folded the paper carefully and tucked it into his vest pocket, then turned to look at her properly for the first time. "Madam," he said quietly, and offered his hand to help her down from the platform. Clara hesitated, then took it. His grip was warm and steady, and he did not hold on longer than necessary. Once she was on solid ground, he released her immediately and took a step back, as if giving her space to breathe. "My horse is at the livery," he said. "We should go." Clara found her voice, though it came out rougher than she intended. "Where are you taking me?" Something flickered in his gray eyes. "Somewhere we can talk privately. You have my word that I mean you no harm." She wanted to laugh at that. His word. What good was anyone's word in a town where daughters could be sold to pay gambling debts? But what choice did she have? She nodded mutely and followed him down the street, acutely aware of the stares and whispers that followed them. The livery was blessedly cool and dim after the bright street. A magnificent bay gelding stood in one of the stalls, already saddled as if the stranger had been prepared to leave quickly. He retrieved his saddlebags and bedroll, then led the horse outside where Clara waited. "Can you ride?" he asked. "Yes." "Good." He swung into the saddle with fluid ease, then offered his hand again. "We will ride to my camp. It is about an hour from here." Clara took his hand and let him pull her up behind him. She had ridden double before, but never with a stranger who had just purchased her like a piece of furniture. She did not know where to put her hands until the horse started moving, and she instinctively grabbed his waist to keep from falling. They rode out of Alta in silence, heading east into the Wasatch Range. The September afternoon was cooling as they climbed, and Clara was grateful for the breeze that dried the sweat on her neck. The stranger guided his horse with confidence, following a narrow trail that wound through stands of aspen and pine. Clara tried to memorize the route in case she needed to find her way back, but after 30 minutes she gave up. Everything looked the same. Finally, they emerged into a small clearing beside a creek. A campsite was already set up with a small tent, a fire ring, and supplies arranged with military precision. The stranger dismounted and helped Clara down, then began unsaddling his horse. Clara stood awkwardly, unsure what to do with herself. She watched him work, noting the efficiency of his movements, the care he took with his animal. When the horse was hobbled and grazing peacefully, the stranger turned to face her. "My name is Garrett Yates," he said. "I know this situation is frightening, but I need you to listen carefully to what I am about to say." Clara wrapped her arms around herself. "I am listening." Garrett reached into his vest and pulled out the bill of sale. Clara's eyes fixed on it, that damning piece of paper that said she belonged to him. But instead of waving it in her face or using it to make demands, Garrett walked to the fire ring and knelt down. He struck a match against a rock, held it to the paper and watched it catch. Clara gasped. "What are you doing, giving you a choice?" Garrett stood, letting the burning paper fall into the fire ring where it curled and blackened. "That paper said you were my property. I do not believe any person should own another. It is 1878, not 1858, and slavery is supposed to be behind us. What happened in that town today was wrong, and I will not be party to it." Clara's mind reeled. "I do not understand. You paid $2,000. I paid double what that bastard Morton bid because I could not stand to see you go to him," Garrett interrupted, his voice rough with emotion. "I have heard stories about how he treats people. I have seen the bruises on the women who work in his household. I could not let that happen to you." Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks before she could stop them. "But why? You do not even know me." Garrett was quiet for a moment, watching the last of the bill of sale turn to ash. 6 years ago, my sister was in a similar situation. Our father died and left debts. The creditors wanted to take everything, including her. I was working a cattle drive in Texas and did not hear about it until it was too late. By the time I got home, she had been sold to a man who took her south. I never found her. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. Oh God! I swore that if I ever had the chance to prevent the same thing from happening to someone else, I would. Garrett's jaw tightened. Today I had that chance, so I took it. They stood in silence, the only sounds the crackling of the small fire and the burbling of the creek. Clara tried to process what he was saying, but her emotions were too raw, too overwhelming. Finally, she managed to speak. What happens now? Garrett met her eyes. That is your choice. I meant what I said about freedom. You can stay here tonight, rest, and in the morning I will give you money and a horse. You can ride anywhere you want. San Francisco, Denver, back east. Make a new life somewhere far from Alta and your father's debts. Or, Clara asked, because there had to be an or. Or you can come with me to my ranch. It is about a week's ride from here in Wyoming territory. I have a small spread, nothing fancy, but it is profitable. I need help managing it. If you chose to stay, you would work as my partner, not my servant. You would earn fair wages, have your own room, and be free to leave whenever you wished. Clara studied his face, searching for any sign of deception. But Garrett's expression was open, honest, almost vulnerable. This was a man who had lost his sister and carried that guilt like a stone around his neck. Why would you offer me partnership? She asked suspiciously. Why not just hire me as a cook or housekeeper? Because you deserve better than to spend your life cleaning someone else's house, Garrett said simply. And because I think you are stronger than you know. Anyone who can stand on that auction block with their head held high has steel in their spine. I could use a partner like that. Clara's heart was pounding. Every instinct screamed at her to be cautious, to question his motives, to protect herself. But another part of her, the part that had been crushed under the weight of her father's failures and the town's judgment, whispered that this might be her only real chance at something different. I need time to think, she said finally. Garrett nodded. Take all the time you need. Are you hungry? I have supplies. Clara realized she had not eaten since early morning, and even then it had only been a crust of bread. Yes, thank you. They fell into an awkward routine. Garrett started a proper fire while Clara sat on a log and watched. He moved with the competence of someone who had spent years living rough, and soon had bacon sizzling in a pan along with beans warming in a pot. The smell made Clara's mouth water. Tell me about your ranch, she said, breaking the silence. Garrett glanced up from the fire. It is nothing like the big spreads in Texas or Montana. I have about 500 acres along the Green River, maybe 200 head of cattle. The house is small but sturdy. I built it myself 3 years ago. There is good grazing, plenty of water, and a nice view of the mountains. Do you have other workers? I have a hand named Pete who helps during roundup and branding, but mostly it is just me. That is why I could use a partner. Garrett dished beans and bacon onto a tin plate and handed it to her along with a fork. I am away from the house a lot, checking fence lines and moving cattle. Someone needs to be there to manage things, keep the books, handle supplies. It is hard work, but honest work. Clara ate slowly, savoring each bite. The food was simple but well prepared, and she found herself relaxing slightly despite the strangeness of the situation. What happened to your family's ranch? The one you grew up on? Garrett's expression darkened. My father gambled it away before he died. Everything went to pay his debts except what I could hide. I took 3 horses and what little money my mother had saved and headed west. Spent a few years working other people's ranches, learning everything I could, saving every penny. When I had enough, I bought my land and started over." "So you know what it is like," Clara said quietly, "to lose everything because of someone else's choices." "I do." Garrett's eyes met hers. "That is why I could not walk away today." They finished eating in comfortable silence. Garrett cleaned the dishes in the creek while Clara wrapped herself in the blanket he had offered her. The temperature was dropping as the sun sank behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. "You can have the tent," Garrett said when he returned. "I will sleep by the fire." Clara started to protest, but the exhaustion of the day was catching up with her. "Thank you." The tent was small but clean, with a bedroll already laid out. Clara crawled inside and collapsed onto it, too tired to even remove her boots. But despite her exhaustion, sleep did not come easily. Her mind churned with everything that had happened, trying to make sense of it all. Garrett Yates had paid $2,000 for her freedom. He had burned the bill of sale. He was offering her a choice, a real choice, when she had not had one in months. It seemed too good to be true, and Clara had learned the hard way that things that seemed too good to be true usually were. But what if it was not a trick? What if he really meant everything he said? Clara thought about her options. She could take his money and horse and run. San Francisco beckoned with its promise of anonymity and opportunity. She could find work there, maybe as a seamstress or shop girl. Start completely over where no one knew her shame, or she could go to Wyoming. Work beside Garrett Yates as a partner. Learn to manage a ranch. Build something real. The second option terrified her more than the first because it meant trusting a man she barely knew. It meant risking her heart as well as her safety. But it also held the promise of something she had never dared to hope for. A home of her own, work that mattered, and maybe, just maybe, a future that was not defined by her father's failures. Clara finally drifted off to sleep with no decision made, but with a strange sense of peace settling over her exhausted body. She woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. Gray dawn light filtered through the tent fabric, and she could hear Garrett moving around the camp. Clara emerged from the tent, finger combing her tangled hair, to find him crouched by the fire with the coffee pot. "Good morning," he said, handing her a tin cup. "I hope you slept well." "Well enough." Clara accepted the coffee gratefully. It was strong and hot, exactly what she needed. "Have you been up long?" "An hour or so. Old habit." Garrett turned the bacon in the pan. "I wanted to let you sleep." They ate breakfast in the cool morning air, and Clara found herself studying Garrett when he was not looking. He had an honest face, she decided, with strong features that spoke of character rather than cruelty. His hands were scarred from years of hard work, and there was a gentleness in the way he moved that belied his size. "I have made my decision," Clara said suddenly, the words tumbling out before she could second-guess herself. Garrett set down his coffee cup and gave her his full attention. "All right. I want to come with you to Wyoming." Clara took a deep breath. "I want to try being your partner. But I need some promises from you first." "Name them." "I need my own space. My own room that locks from the inside. I need to be paid fair wages and have access to my own money. And I need your word that if I say I want to leave, you will help me do so without question or recrimination." Garrett did not hesitate. "You have my word on all of it. The house has 2 bedrooms, and I will put a new lock on yours. We will work out fair wages, and I will help you open an account at the bank in Green River so your money is yours alone. And if you ever want to leave, for any reason, I will personally escort you wherever you want to go and make sure you get there safely." Relief flooded through Clara, though she had not realized how tense she had been waiting for his answer. "Then yes, I will come with you." A slow smile spread across Garrett's face, transforming it from handsome to something approaching beautiful. "I am glad, truly glad. I think we will make a good team." They broke camp quickly after that, Garrett showing Clara how he packed his gear efficiently for travel. He produced a split riding skirt from his saddlebags, explaining that it had belonged to his mother and he had been carrying it for years, unable to part with it. Clara changed behind a tree, grateful for the practical garment that would make riding easier. Before they left, Garrett counted out $200 from his remaining cash and handed it to Clara. "For your wages," he said when she tried to refuse. "Consider it an advance. Keep it on you at all times. That way, if anything happens to me or you change your mind, you have the means to take care of yourself." Clara tucked the money into the pocket of her skirt, overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness. No one had ever given her money before, let alone trusted her to keep it. The ride to Wyoming took 6 days, and with each mile, Clara felt the weight of Alta lifting from her shoulders. They traveled through breathtaking country, following trails that wound through mountain passes and wide valleys. Garrett proved to be an easy traveling companion, pointing out landmarks and wildlife, sharing stories of his years working cattle drives and building his ranch. Clara found herself talking too, slowly at first, then with growing confidence. She told him about her mother, who had been kind and strong before illness took her, about her childhood dreams of becoming a teacher, about the slow descent into poverty as her father's gambling grew worse and worse. "He was not always like that," she said on the 3rd day as they rested the horse beside a stream. "When my mother was alive, he was different, but after she died, it was like he could not stand to be sober because then he would have to feel the loss." Garrett was quiet for a moment, then said, "My father was similar. Some men do not know how to carry grief. They try to drown it instead, and they pull everyone around them under in the process. You hate him. Your father." "I did for a long time." Garrett skipped a stone across the water. But somewhere along the way, the hate turned to pity. He was weak, and his weakness destroyed him and everyone who loved him. That is its own kind of hell. Clara thought about that as they rode on. She had spent so long being angry at her father that she had not considered feeling anything else. But maybe Garrett was right. Maybe there was a kind of freedom in pity, in accepting that her father's failures were his own and not a reflection of her worth. They talked about lighter things too. Garrett told her about the characters he had met on cattle drives, the wild towns and wilder weather. Clara shared memories of her mother's cooking and the games she had played as a child. Slowly, carefully, they were building something that felt like friendship. On the 5th night, they camped in a meadow filled with wildflowers. The stars overhead were so bright and numerous that Clara felt she could reach up and touch them. Garrett had shot a rabbit earlier, and it was roasting over the fire, filling the air with a mouth-watering smell. "Tell me about your ranch," Clara said, wrapped in her blanket against the evening chill. "Paint me a picture." Garrett's eyes took on a distant look, as if he was seeing it in his mind. "The house sits on a small rise with views in all directions. To the east, you can see the Wind River Range, snow-capped even in summer. The Green River runs through the southern part of the property, lined with cottonwoods that turn gold in the fall. The grassland is good for grazing, not too rocky, with plenty of natural springs. The house is made of local timber, 2 stories, with a porch that wraps around the front. I built a barn big enough for 6 horses and a workshop. There is a root cellar and a chicken coop, though I admit I am not great with chickens." Clara smiled. "I can handle chickens. My mother kept them when I was young. Perfect, see? We are a team already." Garrett turned the rabbit on its spit. "There is also an old line shack on the northern boundary that needs repair. I was thinking it could be fixed up for Pete during busy seasons." "What is Pete like?" "Good man, in his 50s. His wife runs a boarding house in Green River and he picks up work at various ranches to help make ends meet. He knows cattle and is not afraid of hard work. You will like him. Over dinner, they talked about plans for the ranch. Garrett wanted to expand the herd slowly, improve the pastures, maybe add some horses to sell. Clara found herself getting excited about the possibilities, suggesting they start a vegetable garden and maybe some fruit trees. "You have been thinking about this," Garrett observed with a grin. "I've been trying to imagine my new life," Clara admitted. "It helps make it feel real." Something shifted in Garrett's expression, his gray eyes warming. "It is real, Clara, I promise you that. This is not some dream that will disappear in the morning. You have a home waiting for you." The sincerity in his voice made Clara's throat tight. She had to look away, blinking back unexpected tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea what that means to me." They reached the ranch late afternoon on the 6th day, cresting a rise that gave Clara her first view of her new home. Garrett had not exaggerated. The house sat exactly where he described, a solid structure of honey-colored logs with a welcoming porch. The barn was well maintained, and she could see cattle grazing in the distance. The setting sun painted everything in warm, golden light, and the mountains beyond were majestic and eternal. "It is beautiful," Clara breathed. Garrett looked pleased. "Wait until you see it in the morning when the sun comes up. That is when it is really something." They rode down to the house, and Garrett helped Clara dismount. Her legs were stiff from days in the saddle, and she stumbled slightly. Garrett caught her elbow, steadying her, and for a moment they stood close enough that Clara could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes. "Steady there," he said softly, and reluctantly let her go. Clara followed him into the house, her heart pounding for reasons that had nothing to do with the journey. The interior was clean and well organized, with a main room that served as kitchen and living space, and a steep staircase leading to the second floor. The furniture was simple but sturdy, clearly handmade, and everything had a place. "Your room is upstairs on the left," Garrett said, setting down his saddlebags. "I will bring your things up in a moment. There should be fresh linens in the chest." Clara climbed the stairs and found 2 bedrooms separated by a narrow hallway. The one on the left was slightly smaller but had a large window overlooking the eastern mountains. There was a bed with a quilt, a dresser, a washstand, and a chair. Simple, clean, and more than she had dared hope for. True to his word, Garrett brought up her meager belongings and installed a new lock on the door while she watched. He handed her the only key with a formal little bow that made her smile. "There. Your space, your privacy," he said. "Now, I am going to tend to the horse and check on things in the barn. Make yourself at home. There is food in the pantry if you are hungry." After he left, Clara sat on the bed and looked around her room. Her room. A space that was entirely hers where she could lock the door and be safe. The reality of it hit her all at once, and she buried her face in her hands and cried. But these were not tears of fear or shame. They were tears of relief, of hope, of something that felt dangerously like joy. The first weeks on the ranch passed in a blur of activity. Clara threw herself into work with an intensity that surprised both her and Garrett. She cleaned the house from top to bottom, organized the chaotic pantry, and started a detailed inventory of supplies. She took over the cooking, producing meals that were simple but hearty, and Garrett praised everything she made with genuine appreciation. They fell into an easy routine. Garrett would rise before dawn to check on the cattle and handle the outdoor work. Clara would have coffee ready when he came in for breakfast, and they would eat together while discussing the day's plans. After breakfast, Garrett would head back out while Clara managed the household tasks. In the evenings, They would eat dinner together and go over the ranch books, Clara learning how to track expenses and income while Garrett explained the business side of ranching. It was during these evening sessions that Clara began to see Garrett as more than just her rescuer or employer. He was patient with her questions, never making her feel foolish for not knowing something. He valued her opinions and often implemented her suggestions without hesitation. When she proposed starting a more detailed record-keeping system, he immediately purchased the necessary ledgers and supplies from town. But more than that, she began to notice the little things about him. The way his face lit up when he talked about his plans for the ranch. The gentle way he handled the animals. The quiet strength that came not from physical power but from character. He was unfailingly kind, not just to her but to everyone he encountered. When Pete arrived to help with some fence repairs, Garrett treated him with the same respect he would show a wealthy rancher. Clara tried to ignore the flutter in her chest when Garrett smiled at her across the dinner table. She told herself it was gratitude, nothing more. He had saved her from a terrible fate and given her a chance at a new life. Of course, she felt warmth toward him. It did not mean anything more than that. But late at night, alone in her room, she found herself thinking about the color of his eyes and the sound of his laugh. She remembered the feeling of riding behind him, her arms around his waist, and the safety she had felt despite being with a virtual stranger. She thought about the way he looked at her sometimes, when he thought she was not paying attention, with an expression that was both tender and yearning. One crisp October morning, Clara was in the chicken coop gathering eggs when she heard horses approaching. She emerged to see Garrett talking with a well-dressed couple in a fancy buggy. The woman wore an elaborate hat with feathers, and the man had the prosperous look of a successful businessman. Garrett caught sight of Clara and waved her over. "Clara, I would like you to meet Thomas and Margaret Whitmore. They own the largest ranch in the area. Tom, Margaret, this is my business partner, Clara Vaughn." Clara wiped her hands on her apron, acutely aware of how plain she must look compared to Margaret's finery. But Margaret's smile was warm as she extended a gloved hand. "How wonderful to meet you, my dear. Garrett has mentioned you in passing, but I had no idea you were so young and lovely." "It is nice to meet you as well," Clara said, shaking her hand carefully. Thomas Whitmore tipped his hat. "We are having a harvest dance at our place next Saturday. The whole community comes out for it. We would be honored if you both would attend." Garrett glanced at Clara questioningly. "What do you think? It would be a good chance for you to meet the neighbors." Clara's first instinct was to refuse. She had not been to a dance in years and she had no suitable clothes, but something in Margaret's kind eyes made her reconsider. "I would like that," she heard herself say. "Excellent," Margaret clapped her hands together. "I will send over some dress options for you to choose from. We are close to the same size, I think, and I have far too many gowns gathering dust." "Oh, I could not," Clara started, but Margaret waved away her protests. "Nonsense. It would be my pleasure. Besides, you would be doing me a favor. My husband is always complaining about my shopping habits." Thomas laughed good-naturedly. "Guilty as charged, but she is right, Miss Vaughn. Margaret would love to share." After the Whitmores left, Clara turned to Garrett with wide eyes. "A dance! I have not danced in years. I barely remember how." Garrett grinned. "Well, we have a week to practice. If you are willing, I could teach you." The thought of dancing with Garrett made Clara's pulse quicken. "You know how to dance," my mother insisted I learn before she passed. "Said a gentleman should know how to properly escort a lady." Garrett's expression grew wistful. "I was terrible at it as a boy, all elbows and feet, but I got better." That evening, after the dishes were washed, Garrett pushed the table to the side of the room to create space. He started humming a waltz and Clara laughed despite her nervousness. "We do not have music," she pointed out. Use your imagination." Garrett held out his hand. "May I have this dance, Miss Vaughn?" Clara placed her hand in his, and he drew her close, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers gently. They were standing closer than they ever had before, and Clara was intensely aware of his warmth, the clean scent of soap and leather that clung to him, the strength in the arm that guided her. "Follow my lead," Garrett said softly, and began to move. Clara stumbled at first, stepping on his feet more than once, but Garrett was patient. He counted out the rhythm, showed her the basic steps, encouraged her when she wanted to give up. Gradually, she began to relax and let him guide her. They moved around the room in slow circles, and Clara found herself smiling. "You are a good teacher," she said, looking up at him. Garrett's eyes met hers, and something passed between them, an electric current that made Clara's breath catch. "You are a quick learner," he murmured, his voice lower than usual. They practiced every evening that week, and each session brought them physically and emotionally closer. By the time Saturday arrived, Clara could follow Garrett's lead without thinking, their bodies moving in perfect synchrony. But the dancing had awakened something in her, a longing she had tried to suppress. She was falling for Garrett Yates, and she did not know what to do about it. Margaret Whitmore had been as good as her word, sending over 3 beautiful dresses for Clara to choose from. Clara selected a deep blue gown with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. It fit perfectly, and when she looked at herself in the small mirror in her room, she barely recognized the elegant woman staring back at her. Garrett was waiting downstairs in his best suit, his hair neatly combed, his boots polished to a shine. When Clara descended the stairs, he looked up and his mouth actually fell open. "Clara," he breathed, "you look beautiful." Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Thank you. You look very handsome yourself." The ride to the Whitmore ranch passed too quickly. Clara was nervous about meeting so many new people, worried they would somehow know her shameful history. But Garrett seemed to sense her anxiety and kept up a steady stream of conversation, telling her about the various families they would meet. The Whitmore Ranch was magnificent, with a sprawling main house and numerous outbuildings. Lanterns hung from every available surface, casting a warm glow over the party guests already gathered. Music drifted from the barn, which had been cleared and decorated for dancing. Margaret swept down to greet them the moment they arrived, exclaiming over how well the dress suited Clara. She introduced Clara to what seemed like dozens of people, names and faces blurring together. But everyone was friendly, and if anyone thought it odd that Garrett had taken on a young female business partner, they were too polite to say so. The dancing began as the sun set, a local band playing lively reels and waltzes. Garrett claimed the first dance, leading Clara onto the floor with proprietary pride. Being in his arms in front of others felt different than practicing alone in their house. It felt like a statement, a declaration, and Clara could see the speculative looks from other women. "Are you all right?" Garrett asked, guiding her through a turn. "Yes, just overwhelmed. We can leave whenever you want," but Clara found she did not want to leave. For the first time since her mother died, she felt like she belonged somewhere. The community was welcoming, the music was joyful, and being in Garrett's arms felt like the most natural thing in the world. Other men asked her to dance throughout the evening, and Garrett graciously allowed it, though Clara noticed he never took his eyes off her. She danced with Thomas Whitmore, with Pete, who had arrived with his wife, with several young ranchers who complimented her grace. But her favorite dances were always with Garrett. During a break in the music, Margaret pulled Clara aside. They stood on the porch overlooking the party, glasses of lemonade in hand. "You and Garrett make a handsome couple," Margaret said with a knowing smile. Clara nearly choked on her drink. "We are business partners, nothing more," my dear, I have been married for 20 years. I know what longing looks like, and that man is absolutely smitten with you." Margaret patted Clara's hand. "The question is, how do you feel about him?" Clara opened her mouth to deny it, then found she could not. "I care about him," she admitted quietly. "More than I should, perhaps, but I do not want to ruin what we have built. He saved me from a terrible situation, gave me a home and purpose. I cannot risk losing that." Margaret's expression softened. "Oh, my sweet girl, love is always a risk, but from what I can see, Garrett would walk through fire for you, and life is too short to deny yourself happiness out of fear." Before Clara could respond, Garrett appeared at her elbow. "Everything all right?" "Perfect," Margaret said with a wink at Clara. "I was just telling your partner what a lucky man you are." Garrett's eyes found Clara's. "I am well aware of my good fortune, Mrs. Whitmore." They stayed until late in the evening, finally taking their leave when Clara could barely keep her eyes open. The ride home was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. When they reached the ranch, Garrett helped Clara down from the buggy, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you for going tonight," he said softly. "I know it was not easy for you." "Thank you for making it easier," Clara replied. "I had a wonderful time." They stood in the moonlight, so close that Clara could feel his breath on her face. For a moment she thought he might kiss her, and her heart raced with anticipation and fear. But Garrett stepped back, breaking the spell. "Good night, Clara," he said, his voice rough. "Good night," she whispered and fled into the house. In her room, Clara leaned against the locked door and tried to calm her racing heart. Margaret's words echoed in her mind. Love is always a risk. But was it a risk she was brave enough to take? The weather turned colder as November arrived, and with it came the hard work of preparing for winter. Garrett and Pete worked long days repairing fences and moving cattle to lower pastures. Clara threw herself into preserving food, making sure they would have enough supplies to last through the harsh Wyoming winter. During this busy time, Clara and Garrett saw less of each other during the day, but their evening meals together became even more precious. They would sit by the fire after dinner, talking about everything and nothing. Garrett taught Clara to play chess, and she proved to be a formidable opponent. She read aloud from books while he mended tack, her voice filling the quiet house with stories of adventure and romance. One evening in mid-November, a fierce storm blew in without warning. Clara was in the barn feeding the chickens when the wind picked up, and by the time she tried to make it back to the house, the snow was falling so thick she could barely see. She stumbled forward, disoriented, calling for Garrett. Strong arms caught her, pulling her against a solid chest. "I have got you," Garrett's voice came through the howling wind. He half carried, half dragged her to the house, both of them covered in snow by the time they tumbled through the door. Clara was shaking violently, her teeth chattering. Garrett immediately began stripping off her wet cloak and shawl. "We need to get you warm," he said urgently. "Your lips are turning blue." He wrapped her in blankets and set her in front of the fire, then disappeared upstairs and returned with a quilt from his own bed. He wrapped that around her too, then knelt in front of her, chafing her cold hands between his. "That was foolish of me," Clara managed through chattering teeth. "I should have stayed in the barn." "I should have checked on you sooner," Garrett countered, his face tight with worry. "When I realized you were still out there," he broke off, shaking his head. "I have never been so frightened in my life." The raw emotion in his voice made Clara's heart skip. "I am all right now, thanks to you." Garrett's eyes met hers, and Clara saw everything he had been holding back reflected there. Fear, relief, and something deeper that made her catch her breath. His hands were still wrapped around hers, warming them, and she could feel the tremor that ran through him. "Clara," he said hoarsely, "I need to tell you something. I have tried to keep this to myself, tried to be professional and respectful, but I cannot do it anymore. These past months with you have been the happiest of my life. You are not just my partner in business. You are my friend, my companion, the first person I think of in the morning and the last before I sleep. He swallowed hard. I am in love with you. Clara's breath left her in a rush. Garrett, I know I have no right, he continued quickly, as if afraid to let her speak. You came here seeking freedom and independence, not another man trying to control your life. If you do not feel the same, we will never speak of this again. But I could not keep it inside any longer. I love you, Clara Vaughn. I love your strength and your courage and your kindness. I love the way you hum when you are cooking and the way you bite your lip when you are concentrating. I love everything about you, and I think I have since the moment I saw you on that auction block, refusing to let them break your spirit. Tears were streaming down Clara's face. You truly love me. This is not just gratitude or obligation. It is love, Garrett said firmly. Pure and simple and terrifying. I would spend the rest of my life proving it to you if you would let me. Clara freed one hand from the blankets and touched his face, feeling the rough stubble beneath her palm. Then I have something to tell you too. I love you, Garrett Yates. I think I started falling for you on that ride from Alta when you told me about your sister. You are the best man I have ever known, and these past months have been the most precious of my life. I was afraid to hope that you might feel the same. Garrett's face transformed with joy. You love me, he repeated as if he could not quite believe it. I love you, Clara confirmed, laughing through her tears. So very much. Garrett stood, pulling her up with him, blankets and all. His hands cupped her face with infinite tenderness. May I kiss you, please? Clara whispered. Garrett's lips met hers in a kiss that was gentle and reverent, as if she was something precious and fragile. But Clara was neither of those things, and she kissed him back with all the pent-up passion and longing of the past months. Garrett made a sound low in his throat and pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her, the blankets falling away. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Garrett rested his forehead against hers. I have wanted to do that for so long. Then do it again, Clara said boldly, and he did. They stayed up talking long into the night, the storm raging outside while they sat curled together by the fire. They shared their hopes and dreams, their fears and insecurities. Garrett told Clara more about his sister, about the guilt he still carried. Clara told him about the shame she felt over her father's actions, the fear that she was somehow damaged by what she had endured. You are not damaged, Garrett said fiercely, kissing her temple. You are strong and whole and perfect exactly as you are. What happened to you was wrong, but it does not define you. You define yourself. Those words were a balm to Clara's wounded soul. Wrapped in Garrett's arms, listening to his heartbeat beneath her ear, she finally allowed herself to believe in a future that held more than just survival. She believed in happiness, in love, in the possibility of building something beautiful with this extraordinary man. The storm lasted 3 days, trapping them inside the house. But Clara did not mind. She and Garrett existed in a bubble of new love, learning each other in ways both profound and mundane. She discovered that Garrett liked his coffee black but his tea sweet, that he had a scar on his shoulder from a longhorn's horn, that he sang slightly off-key but with great enthusiasm when he was happy. Garrett learned that Clara talked in her sleep sometimes, murmuring fragments of dreams, that she was ticklish behind her knees, that she had once wanted to be a teacher and still harbored that dream in the back of her mind. On the 4th day, the storm broke and the world emerged covered in pristine white snow. Garrett had to dig them out and check on the animals, but he kept coming back to the house to kiss Clara, unable to stay away for long. I am supposed to be working, he said after one such visit, his arms around her waist as she tried to make bread. "Then work," Clara said, laughing as he nuzzled her neck. "Cannot. Too distracted by you." Pete arrived the next day to help with storm cleanup and took one look at them before grinning widely. "About damn time," he said. "I was wondering how long it would take you two to figure it out." Clara blushed, but Garrett just laughed and kept his arm around her shoulders. They made no secret of their relationship, and when they went to town for supplies the following week, Garrett introduced Clara as his betrothed. Clara's heart soared at the word, at the public claim and commitment it represented. They were married in a simple ceremony at the Whitmore Ranch in early December, with Margaret serving as Clara's witness and Pete as Garrett's. Clara wore the blue dress from the harvest dance, with a wreath of evergreen boughs in her hair. Garrett wore his best suit and looked at her as if she had hung the moon. The vows were traditional, but when Garrett promised to love and cherish her all the days of his life, Clara heard the deeper promise beneath the words. He was vowing to never let her be powerless again, to always give her choice, to be her partner in every sense of the word. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Garrett kissed her with such tenderness that Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks. This was what she had been waiting for her entire life. Not just love, but partnership. Not just safety, but freedom. Not just a home, but a future limited only by their dreams and determination. The wedding celebration was small but joyful, their friends toasting to their happiness and future. As Clara danced with her new husband, she caught sight of Margaret watching them with satisfaction. "You were right," Clara told her later. "Love was worth the risk." Margaret kissed her cheek. "It always is, dear, always." Garrett and Clara spent their first night as a married couple in her room, which had been transformed with flowers and candles courtesy of Margaret's romantic heart. Garrett carried Clara over the threshold, then set her down gently and just looked at her. "What are you thinking?" Clara asked, touching his face. "That I am the luckiest man alive," Garrett said. "That I cannot believe you are really mine." "I am yours," Clara confirmed, "and you are mine. For as long as we both shall live." Their wedding night was everything Clara had hoped for and nothing she had feared. Garrett was gentle and patient, putting her comfort above his own desires, showing her the beauty that could exist between a man and woman who truly loved each other. Afterward, they lay tangled together, and Clara felt completely safe and cherished for the first time in her life. The first year of their marriage passed in a blur of hard work and deep happiness. Clara discovered she had a gift for managing the ranch's finances, and under her careful stewardship, they began to turn a larger profit. Garrett expanded the herd and improved the breeding stock, producing cattle that fetched top dollar at market. But more important than the financial success was the life they built together. They were true partners in every sense, making decisions together, supporting each other through challenges, celebrating victories big and small. They argued sometimes, as all couples do, but they learned to fight fair and always went to bed friends. In the spring, Clara missed her monthly courses and realized with a mixture of terror and joy that she was pregnant. When she told Garrett, he swept her into his arms and spun her around, whooping with delight. "We are having a baby," he kept repeating, as if he could not quite believe it. "We are going to be parents." Clara laughed and cried simultaneously. "Are you happy?" "Happy, I am ecstatic." Terrified but ecstatic. Garrett set her down carefully as if she might break. "Are you happy?" "So happy I could burst," Clara confirmed. "I never thought I would get to have this. A husband I love, a home, and now a baby. It is more than I ever dreamed possible." Garrett became impossibly protective during Clara's pregnancy, insisting she rest more and work less. Clara tolerated his fussing with good humor, knowing it came from love. Margaret and the other ranch wives surrounded her with advice and support, preparing her for the challenges and joys of motherhood. In late November, as the first snow began to fall, Clara went into labor. It was long and difficult, and there were moments when Clara feared she might not survive. But Garrett stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, murmuring encouragement, being her anchor in the storm of pain. Finally, after what felt like forever, the baby's cries filled the room. The midwife cleaned him quickly and placed him in Clara's arms. "A boy," she announced. "A big, healthy boy." Clara looked down at her son, overwhelmed by the fierce love that surged through her. He had Garrett's dark hair and a tiny, perfect face that was already scrunching up for another cry. Garrett leaned over them both, his eyes wet with tears. "He is beautiful," Garrett whispered. "He looks like you." "He has your hair," Clara countered, "and your stubborn chin." They named him James after Garrett's father, a gesture of forgiveness and hope for the future. Jimmy, as they called him, was a good baby who slept reasonably well and ate with enthusiasm. Garrett was a doting father, walking the floor with Jimmy when he fussed, changing nappies without complaint, singing him lullabies in his off-key baritone. Watching Garrett with their son made Clara fall in love with him all over again. He was patient and gentle, clearly terrified of doing something wrong, but determined to be the father his own father had failed to be. When Jimmy was 3 months old, Clara found Garrett in the nursery one night, holding their sleeping son and whispering promises. "I will never let you down," Garrett was saying. "I will teach you right from wrong, how to work hard and love deeply. I will show you how to treat people with respect and stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves. I will be the father you deserve." Clara's heart felt too large for her chest. She slipped her arms around Garrett from behind, and he leaned back against her. "He is lucky to have you as a father," she whispered. "We are both lucky to have you," Garrett replied, turning to kiss her softly. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and milestones. Jimmy grew into a curious, energetic toddler who followed his father everywhere, mimicking his walk and trying to help with ranch chores. When he was 2, Clara discovered she was pregnant again, and this time she gave birth to twin girls they named Sarah and Elizabeth. The ranch house rang with the sound of children's laughter, and Clara's heart was full to bursting. Garrett hired additional help so Clara would not be overwhelmed, and they built an addition onto the house to accommodate their growing family. Pete became like a grandfather to the children, teaching them to ride and telling them stories of the old days. Margaret and Thomas were frequent visitors, doting on the children and becoming like family. Through it all, Clara and Garrett's love deepened and matured. They still made time for each other, stealing moments alone when the children were sleeping, going on occasional rides together across their land. Garrett still looked at Clara as if she was the most precious thing in the world, and Clara still marveled that this life was truly hers. One evening, when Jimmy was 8 and the twins were 6, Clara stood on the porch watching her family. Garrett was teaching the children to rope a fence post, patient and encouraging as they tried again and again. The setting sun painted everything in golden light, and Clara was struck by how different this scene was from the one 10 years ago when she had stood on an auction block. Believing her life was over, Garrett looked up and caught her watching. He said something to the children, then jogged over to the porch and pulled her into his arms. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, kissing her forehead. "How far we have come," Clara said, resting her head on his chest. "How grateful I am that you walked into my life that day." "I am the grateful one," Garrett countered. "You gave me everything I never knew I needed. A home, a family, a purpose beyond just surviving." Clara pulled back to look at him. "Do you ever regret it, spending all that money, taking on a woman you barely knew?" Not for a single second, Garrett said firmly. It was the best investment I ever made. $2,000 for a lifetime with you. I would pay it again in a heartbeat. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Even after all these years, he could still make her cry with his words. I love you, Garrett Yates. And I love you, Clara Yates. Today, tomorrow, and all the days after that. They stood together watching their children play, and Clara knew that this was happiness. Not the absence of hardship, because there had been plenty of that over the years. Not the promise that nothing would ever go wrong, but the deep, abiding certainty that whatever came, they would face it together. The ranch continued to prosper over the years. By the time Jimmy was 20, he was managing much of the day-to-day operations, showing the same work ethic and integrity his father had modeled. The twins, now 18, were both accomplished horsewomen who helped with the breeding program Garrett had started. Clara had fulfilled her dream of teaching, converting one of the outbuildings into a small schoolhouse where she taught not just her own children but the children of neighboring ranches. She found joy in shaping young minds, in seeing them master reading and arithmetic and history. Garrett's hair began to show silver at the temples, and Clara found laugh lines around her eyes when she looked in the mirror. But they wore their age with grace, knowing that each line and gray hair represented years of love and laughter, of challenges overcome and dreams achieved. They became pillars of their community, known for their generosity and fairness. Garrett served on the town council, working to bring better schools and services to the area. Clara organized charity drives for families facing hardship, remembering all too well what it felt like to be desperate and powerless. On their 20th anniversary, Garrett took Clara on a trip to San Francisco, the city she had once considered fleeing to. They stayed in a fine hotel, ate at elegant restaurants, and walked along the waterfront hand in hand. It was wonderful, but Clara found herself eager to return home to their ranch, to their children and the life they had built. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had taken my first offer? Garrett asked one evening as they watched the sun set over the Pacific Ocean. If you had taken the money and horse and run to San Francisco, Clara considered the question seriously. Sometimes. But I think I would have always wondered what I had missed, and I know I would never have been as happy as I am now. Garrett squeezed her hand. I would have spent the rest of my life looking for you, in every crowd, every street, every face. You were meant to be mine, Clara. I believe that with everything I am. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. And you were meant to be mine, my cowboy who paid double and gave me freedom's choice. The best choice I ever made was choosing you. More years passed. Jimmy married a sweet girl from a neighboring ranch and gave them 3 grandchildren. Sarah became a teacher like her mother, opening a school in Green River. Elizabeth married a banker and moved to Cheyenne, visiting regularly with her growing family. Garrett and Clara grew old together gracefully, still partners in every sense. On quiet evenings, they would sit on the porch in rocking chairs, watching the sun set over the mountains, holding hands like the young couple they had once been. One summer evening, when Clara was 65 and Garrett 70, they sat together as they had 1,000 times before. Clara's hair was completely white now, and Garrett's hands were gnarled with arthritis, but the love between them was as strong as ever. Do you remember the first time we danced? Clara asked, watching the evening star appear in the darkening sky. Garrett chuckled. You stepped on my feet constantly. You were a patient teacher. You were worth being patient for. Garrett stood with some difficulty and offered his hand. May I have this dance, Mrs. Yates? Clara took his hand and let him pull her up. Without music, they swayed together on the porch, their movements slow but sure. They had danced together countless times over the decades, at weddings and parties and quiet evenings at home. But this dance, like all the others, felt special. I would do it all over again, Garrett murmured against her hair. Every moment, every year, all of it exactly the same. Me too, Clara whispered. Every single moment. They continued to dance as the stars came out one by one. Two souls who had found each other against all odds and built a love that would last beyond lifetimes. Clara thought back to that terrified girl on the auction block and marveled at the journey that had brought her here to this moment, to this man. Garrett had given her freedom to choose, and she had chosen love. She had chosen partnership. She had chosen him. And he had spent every day since proving that her choice had been the right one. As they swayed together in the gathering darkness, surrounded by the land they had worked and the legacy they had built, Clara knew that this was what happily ever after looked like. Not perfect, never perfect, but real and deep and enduring. The ranch would continue long after they were gone, managed by their children and grandchildren. The community they had helped build would thrive. The love they had shared would echo through the generations, a testament to the power of choosing hope over fear, partnership over possession, love over all else. But for now, in this perfect moment, there was only Clara and Garrett, dancing together as they had for 40 years, as they would for all the years remaining to them. The cowboy who had paid double for her freedom, and the woman who had freely given him her heart. Together, always together, until the very end and beyond. The stars shone brighter as night fell completely, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled its lonely song. But Clara and Garrett were not lonely. They had each other, and that was enough. That was everything. Years continued to unfold like the pages of a well-loved book. Garrett's health began to decline in his 75th year, his strong body finally showing the wear of decades of hard labor. Clara nursed him through a harsh winter, sitting by his bedside, reading aloud as she had done so many years before, holding his hand through the long nights. But spring came, as it always did, and Garrett rallied. He was weaker than before, no longer able to ride out to check the fence lines or move cattle, but his mind remained sharp, and his love for Clara never wavered. He spent his days on the porch, watching the ranch operations he had built, offering advice to Jimmy, who now ran everything. Clara remained remarkably spry, still teaching a few times a week, still managing the household with the same efficiency she always had. But she never strayed far from Garrett's side, treasuring every moment they had left together. One afternoon, as they sat together watching their great-grandchildren play in the yard, Garrett turned to Clara with a serious expression. "I need you to promise me something," he said. Clara's heart clenched, knowing what was coming. "Anything? When I am gone, I need you to keep living. Really living, not just existing. Spend time with our children and grandchildren. Keep teaching. Keep the ranch going. Do not lock yourself away in grief." Tears slipped down Clara's cheeks. "I do not know how to exist in a world without you." Garrett took her hand, his grip still strong despite his frailty. "You are the strongest person I know, Clara Yates. You survived things that would have broken most people. You built a life from nothing. You raised our children to be good, kind humans. You changed this community for the better. That strength does not disappear when I do." "You gave me that strength," Clara argued. "You showed me I was worth more than I believed. No, love, I just helped you see what was already there." Garrett brought her hand to his lips. "You were always strong. You were always worthy. I was just lucky enough to recognize it." They sat in silence for a long while, hands clasped, watching the sun trace its arc across the sky. The great-grandchildren's laughter floated up to them, a reminder of the legacy they had created together. "You have any regrets?" Clara asked softly. Garrett considered the question carefully. I regret that I never found my sister. I regret that my parents did not live to see the man I became or meet you and our children. But as for my life with you, not a single regret, not one moment I would change. Not even when the twins set fire to the barn trying to cook their own dinner, Clara asked with a watery smile. Garrett laughed, the sound warm and rich despite his age. Not even then. That was terrifying, yes, but it is a story we have told 100 times. It is part of our tapestry. He was right, Clara knew. Every moment, good and bad, had woven together to create the rich fabric of their life. The challenges had made their victories sweeter. The sorrows had made them appreciate the joys more deeply. It had not been a perfect life, but it had been perfectly theirs. Garrett lived to see his 78th birthday, celebrated with a grand party that brought together family and friends from across the territory. He was weak by then, but his eyes shone with happiness as he was surrounded by the people he loved. He held Clara's hand throughout the celebration, his anchor, his North Star, his everything. That night as they prepared for bed, Garrett took Clara in his arms and held her close. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair. "For what? For choosing me. For building this life with me. For 48 years of love and laughter and partnership. For everything you have given me." Clara pulled back to look at him, memorizing every beloved line of his face. "I should be thanking you. You saved me, Garrett, in every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," Garrett corrected gently. "That is what love does. It makes us both stronger than we could ever be alone." They made love that night with the tenderness of long familiarity, knowing each other's bodies as well as their own. Afterward they lay tangled together, Clara's head on Garrett's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I love you, Clara Yates," Garrett murmured, his fingers trailing through her white hair. "I will love you beyond death, beyond time, beyond everything. And I love you, Garrett Yates. Always and forever." Garrett passed peacefully in his sleep. 2 weeks later, Clara curled against his side as she had been for nearly 50 years. She woke to find him still and cool, his face peaceful. And though her heart shattered into a million pieces, she was grateful that he had gone gently, without pain or fear. The funeral was attended by what seemed like the entire territory. People came from hundreds of miles away to pay their respects to a man who had been unfailingly kind, scrupulously honest, and deeply loved. They told stories of Garrett's generosity, his wisdom, his quiet strength. Clara listened to them all, finding comfort in knowing that her husband's legacy would live on in the hearts of so many. She kept her promise to Garrett. Though the grief was overwhelming at times, Clara continued to live fully. She spent time with her children and grandchildren, delighting in the newest additions to the family. She kept teaching, finding purpose in shaping young minds. She even learned to manage the ranch business again, working alongside Jimmy to honor Garrett's vision. At night, alone in the bed they had shared, Clara would talk to Garrett as if he could hear her. She told him about her day, about the children's accomplishments, about the changing world around them. Sometimes she imagined she could feel his presence, a warm comfort in the darkness, and it eased the ache of his absence. 5 years after Garrett's death, Clara was teaching class when a sharp pain seized her chest. She managed to dismiss the children safely before collapsing into her chair, knowing with strange certainty that her time had come. Jimmy found her there an hour later, a peaceful smile on her face, her hand clutching a locket that held pictures of Garrett and their children. The family buried Clara next to Garrett on a hill overlooking their ranch, with a view of the mountains they had both loved. The headstone was simple, carved with their names and the dates of their lives, but at the bottom, their children had added one line: "Together in life, together in eternity." The ranch remained in the family for generations. each new owner adding their own chapter to the story, while honoring the legacy of the couple who had started it all. The tale of Garrett and Clara became family legend, passed down with embellishments and love, a reminder of what true partnership looked like. Young girls would ask to hear about the brave woman who had been sold on an auction block, but had found her strength and freedom. Young boys would listen wide-eyed to stories of the cowboy who had paid double not to own someone, but to set them free. And everyone, young and old, would sigh with satisfaction at the ending, the part where love conquered all, because that was the truth at the heart of Garrett and Clara's story. Love had conquered the shame of Clara's past and the grief of Garrett's losses. Love had built a ranch, raised a family, and created a legacy that would endure for generations. Love had turned a moment of desperation into a lifetime of joy. And though Garrett and Clara were gone from the earth, their love remained, woven into the fabric of the land they had worked, the house they had filled with laughter, the children they had raised, and the community they had helped build. It lived on in every sunset over the mountains, in every spring when the wildflowers bloomed, in every child who learned to ride on their land. The cowboy had paid double and given freedom's choice. The woman had chosen love. And together, they had created something that death itself could not diminish. A love story for the ages, a testament to the power of choosing hope, partnership, and each other, every single day for all the days they were given and beyond. In the end, that was the greatest gift Garrett had given Clara, and she had given him in return. The freedom to love and be loved completely, without reservation, without condition. The freedom to build a life of purpose and meaning. The freedom to be truly, wholly themselves. And that freedom, that love, that choice, echoed through time, inspiring future generations to reach for the same kind of partnership, the same depth of commitment, the same willingness to see another person's worth and cherish it. The story of Garrett and Clara Yates became more than just family history. It became a beacon, a reminder that even in the darkest moments when all seems lost, love can find a way. Because on that dusty September day in 1878, when a cowboy stepped forward to bid on a woman's freedom, he set in motion a chain of events that would ripple forward through time. He could not have known that his act of compassion would lead to a love that would last 50 years and create a legacy that would endure for generations. He simply knew that he could not walk away, could not let injustice stand when he had the power to stop it. And Clara, standing on that auction block with her heart full of fear and her chin held high in defiance, could not have known that the tall stranger with gray eyes would become her everything, her savior, her partner, her best friend, her lover, her home. She only knew that when he offered his hand to help her down, something in her soul recognized something in his, and she took a leap of faith that would change both their lives forever. That is the power of choice, of freedom, of love. It can take a moment of horror and transform it into a lifetime of happiness. It can take two broken people and make them whole. It can build empires from dust and create legacies that outlast stone. The ranch still stands today, a working operation run by the 6th generation of Yateses. On the hill overlooking the valley, 2 headstones stand side by side, weathered by time but still legible. Visitors still come occasionally, drawn by the story, wanting to see where it all began. And if you stand there at sunset, when the mountains turn purple and gold, when the wind whispers through the grass and the first stars appear in the darkening sky, you can almost feel them. Garrett and Clara, together still, dancing on the porch of memory, locked in each other's arms for all eternity. That is the end of their story, but also the beginning of countless others, because true love never really ends. It just transforms, shifting from one generation to the next, inspiring new love stories, new acts of courage, new choices to see another person's worth and cherish it. The cowboy paid double and gave freedom's choice. The woman chose love, and the world was better for it. That is the legacy of Garrett and Clara Yates. A reminder that in choosing love, in choosing freedom, in choosing to see the worth in another human being, we create something that outlasts us all. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, Garrett and Clara are still together, still dancing, still deeply in love, having proven that some bonds are strong enough to transcend even death itself. Their story is complete, their love eternal, their legacy secure. They lived fully, loved deeply, and left the world better than they found it. What more could anyone ask from a life well lived? What greater legacy could anyone leave? In the end, Garrett and Clara's story is not just a tale of the Wild West, though it is that. It is not just a romance, though it is that too. It is a reminder of what we are all capable of when we choose courage over fear, love over hate, partnership over domination. It is a story that will be told and retold as long as there are people who believe in the power of love to transform, to heal, to redeem. As long as there are those who understand that true freedom comes not from being alone, but from choosing to be with someone who sees you, values you, and loves you for exactly who you are. That is the gift Garrett gave Clara, and Clara gave Garrett. And that is the gift their story gives to all of us. Hope that love like theirs is possible, that redemption is real, that our choices matter, and that even in our darkest moments, salvation can come from the most unexpected places. The sun sets on their story now, but like all great loves, it never truly ends. It simply becomes part of the eternal song of humanity, a verse in the great ballad of love and loss and triumph. Garrett and Clara Yates lived, loved, and left a legacy that will endure as long as there are people to tell their tale. And that, dear reader, is the power of a love story, not just to entertain but to inspire, to challenge, to remind us what is possible when two people choose each other every day through every challenge, until death parts them and beyond. The cowboy and his bride, partners in every sense, together for all eternity. A fitting end to a story that began with a desperate gamble and ended with a love that conquered all.